All right. Today's presenter is Meta Sarmiento, who is an outreach coordinator from the Colorado State Employee Assistance Program, or CSAP. So I will turn it over to you, Meta, for further introduction.
Thanks, Victoria. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen before continuing. All right. So, good afternoon. I hope everyone's having a great day. My name is Meta Sarmiento. I'm the outreach coordinator, like Victoria mentioned. In addition to being the outreach coordinator, I'm also one of CSAP's emotional intelligence coaches. So, I assist state leaders in deepening their capacities around emotional intelligence and navigating um, being a more empathetic leader. Okay, so today is all about work-life balance. Is it a misconception or possibility? I always joke with folks like, it's always funny to give a work-life balance presentation during people's lunch hour. So I've always just cracked that joke. Okay, so to get us started, what's something you enjoy doing outside of work? I would love to know if you can send that via chat just so everybody has access and can have eyes on it. It would be awesome. What is something you enjoy doing outside of work? Running, yes. Reading, Pilates. Ugh, I can never do Pilates. It's so hard. Respect. Baking, hot yoga. Oh my gosh. Yoga's hard enough. Introduce hot to it. Oh, baking, exercise, being a plant mom. My mom loves being a plant mom. Um, as you can see, y'all, there's so many cool things. Erin, snowboarding. Yes, I've been to Loveland twice now. It's looking all right up there. Hanging out with my dog, Brooke with the puzzles. Yes, being outside. Thanks, Katie. So, if you haven't already, check out this list that folks are sharing in the chat. Um, if you're one of those people who are sitting here right now thinking, I haven't really done much outside of work that I enjoy, then that's also great information, right? Because now it's on your radar. Now you're thinking about doing more beyond work hours, which is always a good thing to be thinking about. So here's some more ways to engage with this presentation. I know we're keeping cameras off just to avoid any lag, so that's cool. I will deal with not having any nonverbal communication. However, I would love to ask folks to enrich the discussion, right? You can raise your hands. There's a raise hand function here on Zoom. You can unmute when we are ready for you to unmute so that you can enrich the discussion. Another way to enrich the discussion is utilizing the chat that we just used. And there are also reactions. So because I can't see faces, we're not in the same room, there are reactions at the bottom of your screen. You hear something that you like, you can give it a thumbs up. There's hearts. I think I got a few jokes. You can send a joy emoji through there. So again, different ways to engage with it. And it would be really awesome, especially because I can't see folks' faces. So that'd be great if you can engage that way. All right. So here's a little bit more about me, so I don't feel like a complete stranger floating on your screen here. I was born and raised in the Pacific island of Guam. It's an unincorporated territory. I have a bachelor's in English Lit. I have a master's in teaching. I've been with CSAP for over a year, but prior to coming to CSAP, I was actually a full-time educator. I worked primarily at the high schools. I taught a bunch of English classes, a bunch of creative writing classes. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm also an emotional intelligence coach for CSAP. And what I love doing outside of work is poetry and hip hop. I love being on stage. I love writing rhymes. And I just love being in community with people through the creative arts. So that's me in a nutshell. Okay. Let me push forward here. So here are the goals for today's presentation. I have you till about 12:55-ish. So today we're going to discuss this idea of work-life balance and the concept of flourishing. We're going to understand the PERMA wheel, P-E-R-M-A-H. If you don't know what that is, no worries. We're going to get into it. And lastly, hopefully leave this presentation today with some insights about living a more holistic life. We at CSAP love the phrase holistic. So those are our goals. So here are some more questions you can send via chat, or if you're feeling up to it, you can raise your hand and you can enrich the discussion using the unmute feature. When you hear people say achieve work-life balance, what do you think they mean? Have you ever achieved this thing called work-life balance? And if you did, how did you feel and what were you doing? Would love to hear from y'all, either via chat or if any folks want to join the discussion on the microphone, that'd be awesome. Feel free to send your thoughts. Kim says, work at a pace and amount that leaves enough time and energy to enjoy hobbies in life. We love it. Yes. Thanks, Kim, for sharing that. Folks are loving it. Folks are loving it. Carla, balance between work life and personal life, for sure. Dana, not thinking about work during our time off. Ooh, that's a big one, right? We're off the clock. Let's not think about it. Totally feel that. Victoria, work life balance to me is not letting work consume your life. I love the phrase, not consume your life. You work your hours and then leave the stress behind to live the rest of your life. We love it. Best work life balance feeling, according to Allison, was when I left my job at CRC. So going to work was a value to add to my life. Helping people gave me motivation and energy to do what I love. We love it. Feel like work is a part of my life, Stacy, so always resisted this phrase. To me, it's finding time for work and all of the things that are part of my life. We appreciate all of the things that y'all just shared. What I'm sensing here, or at least the through line, is like this idea of boundaries, right? Like we're able to go to work, end work, and then begin life. There's a clear cutoff. I can log off, I can clock off, I can maybe exit the space in which I work and enter the spaces of my personal life, perhaps. Aaron, I felt balanced when I felt like I could feel successful during the hours that I work and feel happy separated from work, not behind and not bored in either sphere. Ooh, I love that phrase, not behind and not bored in either sphere. We love it. As you can see, folks are giving you some reaction and love too. Thank y'all for sharing. We really appreciate, right, when folks share, because there's always like value in other people's wisdom and knowledge. So we love it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to offer you this thing. We're going to reconsider the concept of work and life. I think it was Stacy who said, I feel like work is part of life, so resisted the phrase work-life balance. And so we're going to actually kind of run with that. It was a great segue. I want you to reconsider the concept. So when we think about work and life, this is the image that my coachees often find in their mind. When I tell them, all right, let's talk about work and life, they picture this. It's like a scale, or I don't know what elementary schools y'all went to, but we used to have a seesaw, right? It used to be a thing. I don't think they exist much anymore. And oftentimes we put work and life on either end, A and B. This is the most dominant concept that most people have when they hear the phrase work-life balance. What this does, work and life are often put on opposite sides of one another. Work and life are then separate things. They're mutually exclusive. And that's why I'm highlighting Stacy's way of thinking that work is part of life. So what this does then, y'all, from our position at CSAP, is it creates almost a false dichotomy in a lot of ways. We separate the idea of work and life as A and B the same way we separate things like hot and cold, right? By the very nature of opposites, that's what it becomes. They are literally opposing forces oftentimes. They're fighting, they're competing for attention, for space. Say the same way we put day and night on opposite ends, fast and slow on opposite ends. tall and short on opposite ends. I'm a 5'5" king, so I know all about the short life. But the point is, it's A and B, right? This is the most dominant image that people have. And so when we shift the metaphor, then we like to offer folks this image instead. There is no sound in this video. Here is a man on what we call a wobble board. It is a board that is never truly centered. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But as you can see here, he's trying to constantly just find that center, find that balance point. And it tilts in a 360-degree movement all over the place. How he shifts his weight, a little bit too much to the left, a little bit forward, a little bit back. And so we like offering our coach, I like offering my coachees this metaphor instead of this A and B scale. Because in reality, when you think about work, when you think about life, it isn't ever just A and B, is it? Work, say, is A. Work really isn't just A, it's A.1, A.2, A.3, A.4. Same with personal life, B. It's never just B, it's B1, B2, B3, B4, B1000, right? There's so much involved. So that's the first thing that I offer my coaches often at CSAP, is to shift the mindset away from an A and B balance scale to a more wobble board metaphor. To push the concept further, I also offer this, a bowl of spaghetti. I don't know how many of you have kids. Well, I guess it's hard to do this virtually, but normally folks' hands just shoot up into the sky. For those of us who have children, especially in like children who are younger, thanks Sherry, appreciate it. Children who are younger, say like, in the range of 2 to maybe 4 years old. I have a niece. I used to babysit her all the time. You ever seen a toddler mess around with spaghetti noodles? It gets messy. What I offer my coachees is that work and life are actually more like spaghetti noodles than they are A and B. Work and components of life are separate, but they are almost endlessly intersecting. So they're more like that. They aren't truly separate, right? They affect each other to a great degree. One thing will affect the other thing. Generally speaking, there was a point in history where bosses would tell employees, I don't care what's happening at your house, leave it at the door when you clock in. In 2024, we hear that and we're all kind of like, not true. Because what happens at home does affect how you feel when you're walking into work, and vice versa. Being a former educator, one of my favorite examples of this idea that you can't actually separate the personal from the professional or the work is, as a teacher, I can't tell a kid, hey, I don't care what happened to you at lunchtime. When you're in my class, you're only focused on work. Right? What we know about teenage brains is whatever happened out there is going to be brought into here. And it's the same way for our adult brains too. Yes, we may have more emotional intelligence and we have more coping mechanisms. But the fact of the matter is, work does affect life and vice versa. To push the concept a little bit further, here's another example. How many of you chose to live in a certain zip code because it was either closer to where you work or to a certain location near work? We see this all the time. To push it even further, you meet children, and even at the elementary age, you're already asking kids, we are already asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? What kind of career do you see yourself in? They're 8, right? So again, just an example of how work and life are actually more interconnected than they are two mutually exclusive things, two things that are completely separate from one another. Okay. Before I push any further, does anyone have any questions or curiosities, comments maybe, about the concepts that I just introduced to folks? Does not look like there are. And yeah, to Stacy's point, sorry, I didn't gloss over it. Stacy's in the chat. Transition to fully remote work has been a great to add flexibility to merge work and life. Yeah, 100%. And I think, Stacy, the opposite is also true for a lot of folks who are like actually struggling with the fact that now my home is my workplace, right? And that's sort of just another example, right, of like this interconnectedness that we're all trying to figure out, the bowl of spaghetti noodles that is work and life. Okay, pushing the concept a little bit further, what we found at CSAP is striving for perfect balance actually leads to frustration and disappointment. I think somewhere along the way, in all the talk about work life balance, the misconception that you can achieve perfect balance was accepted. And what we know, and what I know from emotional intelligence coaching, is that simply striving for perfection can sometimes cause the disappointment in itself. So, and that's why the wobble board is a much more accurate depiction of what we're doing than the seesaw A and B. In addition to that, what I offer a lot of my coaches is this idea of span of control. You've heard it before in some shape or form, but what I found with my coaches is that when folks focus on what they can control, it often leads to improving the quality of life, both professional and personal, right? So, what I used to do, I used to draw circles. You've probably seen a version of this. I literally used to draw circles on a piece of paper and used to ask myself, okay, what are the things I can control? And I would literally list those things inside of the circle. This was me practicing and training my mind and my brain to truly focus on the things that I can control. From the most mundane thing to the most profound thing that I could control. So here's an example of maybe a mundane thing. My alarm clock is going off. Should I hit snooze? How many times should I hit snooze? That's sort of an example of a mundane thing that I can actually control. A more profound thing that I might be able to control. What books am I going to allow myself to read? What am I going to choose to consume in terms of the literature I engage with, right? Because there's amazing concepts in literature. So that's an example of a profound thing. I use the child concept a lot. You can't actually control how your child behaves. So let's say they have a test coming up, elementary school, maybe their multiplication test is right around the corner. I, as a parent, cannot actually control how well my child is going to do on this test. But you know what I can control? Maybe we can spend an extra 10 minutes studying together. 10 minutes less screen time on the iPad. So again, we're just going back to this idea of things that I can control. An example of span of control in the work setting for me. So I love remote days, by the way. I have 3 remote days now, but when I first started, I had 2 remote days. I had to report to office 3 times out of the week. I made a case for myself. Again, going back to the span of control, what can I control? Hey, let me try and convince my supervisor that I can actually do well with a 3rd remote day, that I can still be as effective and if not more, right? So what do? We sat down. I asked her, hey, I could control asking for a meeting. I could control creating a bullet point list. I could control developing an argument. And I did all that. And I, at the end, got my 3rd remote day, right? So I could have sat there and maybe complained about the things that I can't control. But instead, I focused my attention on what I could control. So again, those are just all examples of how to use this idea of the span of control. It's not some earth-shattering technique or strategy by any stretch, but it does take practice. And what I found as a coach is that the more my coachees practice it, the more well-rounded they become and leveled they feel. Molly's in the chat. I agree. Remote work has added much better balance. Love to hear it. It's made such a difference for me achieving my wellness goals. We love to hear it. I'm glad, Molly. Thanks for sharing that. 100%. I agree. I agree too. Even for my wellness goals, 100%. Any questions on this part of the presentation before I move forward? All right. We will push forward. Okay. So, sorry. We're going to introduce this idea called PERMA, P-E-R-M-A-H. It is a theory and model developed by Dr. Martin E.P. Seligman. You might have heard of this person before. It's a model that focuses on building enabling conditions that support flourishing or well-being. We'll talk a little bit more about this idea of flourishing. It's very similar to grit, resilience, and values-directed living. So if you've done any research or have any experience in that, it's very similar. I will send this slide deck to Victoria. Maybe Victoria, you can send it out to everyone else so that you can click on our clickable resources. Want to give credit where it's due. We did not invent this part of the presentation. The PERMA model was created by Dr. Seligman, and the curriculum on Flourish was developed by Dr. Abby O. Beecham and Jenny Reese from the University of Colorado Anschutz and Children's Hospital, Colorado. So they've allowed us to take their work and remix it so that we can also use it in our presentation. So shout outs to them. Now, prior to pushing forward into this, I have to put this up front. The PERMA model assumes you are not in survival mode. It assumes that your basic human needs are being met. So it operates from that assumption already. So here are the pillars of the PERMA model, or the PERMA wheel, as I like to call it. The P stands for positive emotions. The E stands for engagement. The R, relationships. M, meaning. And A, accomplishments. H, health. P-E-R-M-A-H. We present it to folks as pieces of a whole pie, or a wheel, we call it. So these are the pillars. So prior to diving in, I just wanted to give us time. Usually we have a discussion, but we can just send it via chat. In your own words, what does it mean to flourish? And can you think of a moment when you were flourishing? So what does it mean to flourish? And can you think of a moment when you were flourishing? Would love to hear your thoughts in the chat. You're also welcome to unmute if you'd like. Give folks a second. Thanks, Allison. I think of growth when I hear the word flourish. Ooh, we love it. I love the phrase growth. Thanks for sharing, Allison. Anyone else with thoughts? And again, if it's easier to just unmute, you can do that. Victoria, high productivity, low to no worries. Ooh, yes, a worry-free, stress-free kind of vibe. We love it. Dana, think of balance. Katie, I think of thrive. We love it. Growth, thrive, high productivity. Yes. Providing guidance when raising small children and in the workplace. Nice, Sherry. This is when you felt like you were flourishing, right? There's connection. Looks like there's values, right? Purpose, maybe. Yes, definitely. Thanks, Sherry, for sharing. Appreciate it. Wait a couple more seconds. Victoria, flourishing can sometimes mean I have high emotional well-being. Yeah, we're feeling good. We're feeling balanced, right? Thanks for sharing, Victoria. Flourishing is being in the zone. We love the phrase the zone. Thanks, Virginia, for sure. Yes, yes, yes. Thank y'all for sharing your ideas and thoughts. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about flourishing. I appreciate y'all sharing your thoughts. So here are a few of my moments. We didn't quite share the moments via chat, and that's okay. Shout out to Sherry for sharing a specific moment. So I wanted to show you, first of all, I agree with a lot of the things y'all said in the chat in terms of defining what flourishing means. And I want to share some of my moments. So my wedding, right? My wedding day with my wife. Like that was a moment where I felt like, yo, we are flourishing as a couple, as individuals, as a family, right? Um, the man in the back, that's one of our closest friends. He officiated our wedding. It was a beautiful day. Another moment, whenever I'm on stage rocking a mic, I recently sold out my first headlining show in Denver. I felt like I was flourishing beyond belief. I was in the zone. I had high emotional well-being, right? Some of the things that you're saying in the chat. And when I'm coaching clients in boxing, in the boxing gym, watching them go from a certain skill level to a whole new skill level. Sherry, maybe you can relate to that, working with small children, teaching them something new, right? Seeing them achieve something that they maybe didn't even think that they could achieve. So these are just some of my moments when we talk about, have I ever felt like I was flourishing? Indeed, I have. And these are some of my moments. So you apply this perma wheel on top of everything that I just shared. Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and health. They're all present. Pieces of these pies are present in each of these moments. And this is one of my favorite things about this model. We approach work and life often, again, going back to the beginning of this presentation, as two separate things. What this model instead challenges us to do is to not separate work and life. Like, let's not even have that conversation. Let us instead put the perma wheel on top of our entire existence. What I'll do next is I'll talk a little bit about each of these pies, pieces of the pie, in detail so you understand a little bit more what we're actually talking about. So we're going to start with the upper right blue positive emotion. So in the PERMA model of well-being, when we're talking about positive emotion, we are most interested in whether or not, how much of our thoughts are literally positive. The human brain is really good at focusing on the negative because that's what got us through generations upon generations to survive as a species. We used to be worried about lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, right? Now we're beyond that. We're more developed, but our brain is still really good at looking at risk, at danger, at mistakes, essentially the negative. So in the perma wheel, what we're asking is, how much of my thoughts are actually positive emotions? What do I need to do? What strategies do I need to engage with to change my thought patterns so that I spend more of my time thinking positively than I do negatively? That's what the P is interested in the perma wheel. So the E is engagement. Virginia, I'm going to pull your phrase, being in the zone. That's what E is all about. What it's interested in is, am I doing things where I am in the zone? Another phrase we use is, am I in a state of flow? This can be best described as moments where you lose track of time, where you are so engrossed in what you are doing that the rest of the world melts away. That's what the E is interested in. Am I doing things where I am highly engaged? The R is for relationships. And what we're interested in is positive relationships. How positive do I feel about my relationships in life? It's not so much quantity of relationships, but the quality of relationships. Am I doing what is necessary to cultivate positivity in the relationships that I do have? That's what positive relationships is interested in. The next letter is M, stands for meaning. This is interested in asking, am I doing things that feel meaningful, that feel purposeful? This is more commonly understood as, am I doing things that feel bigger than myself? So, am I affecting others beyond me? Oftentimes, that's how people relate to the idea of meaning. The next letter is A, which is accomplishment. This one's kind of straightforward. Everyone has different goals, but the idea of accomplishment is kind of universal. You want to do something that you haven't done yet. Are you working towards something? Are you accomplishing things? What we've found, well, what I found in my coaches, is that folks who are driven by goals, who have plans, who are pushing forward, who are taking the steps necessary to achieve things, feel a lot more positive about how their life is going in general. And lastly, the H is health. This pie is interested in the question, am I doing enough for my health? How good do I feel physically? Now, this is not to say go get a membership at Planet Fitness right now. That's not what this is saying. But this is saying, inside of your capacity, inside of your ability, are you doing what's necessary to feel good on physical level? That's what the H is concerned about. All right, so that's the purple wheel in detail. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Because I've been talking a long time. So if you got questions, I'd love to hear. Or anything to add. All right. It does not appear like we have any questions so far. Okay, so what I wanted to do next is I wanted to use the perma wheel in a much more professional setting, because I think in the past, in other sessions, people understand the wheel on a personal level but can't figure it out on a professional level. So again, right, the perma wheel is not interested in separating work and life. The perma wheel is interested in acting as an overlay for your entire life. So wherever you go, the perma wheel is hovering above you. That's how you should look at the perma wheel. That means that pieces will shift, the size of these pies will change depending on the context that you are in. So here's an example of how the perma wheel applies to my life when I am at the office. So when I get into the office, positive emotions, the P. I like any job in the world, you're not gonna love every second of your job. Well, okay, I may stand corrected. Some people love every second of their job. Great for you. Most people will not love every second of their job. However, at work, you're definitely not gonna catch me complaining 90% of the time, right? I have very positive emotions when I'm at my job, and that took work, right? Partly is because of the E when I'm at work, engagement. I don't know if you can tell. It's hard to tell if you can tell because I can't see y'all's faces, but I'm super into presenting. I am highly engaged. I am in the zone. I get into a state of flow. I love this thing that we call presenting. I love teaching. I love connecting to people. I love delivering valuable information. I get super engaged. When I first started at CSAP, I wasn't doing any presentations. So, span of control, I sat down with my supervisor and said, hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little disengaged from my job, and I would love to find ways to to find activities where I feel more highly engaged. So we all agreed, I think Meta needs to do more presentations. And lo and behold, here we are, me presenting to you this content, right? Um, and so that's just an example, right? R, when we're talking about positive relationships at work, when I first got hired, this is again, thanks, Victoria. I appreciate you. At work, when I first got hired, anytime somebody gets hired at our office, we build intentional time into everyone's calendar so that we can all meet on a one-on-one level. I work in an office full of counselors, right? So when I got hired, I was actually able to meet the entire Denver counseling team. And each person had their own flair and own style. And like we sat down each for like about 20 to 30 minutes, just getting to know each other, right? So again, there was an intentionality behind building these positive working relationships. I remember one of the counselors straight up walked by my office and was like, hey, get your coat. We're going to go to a cafe. Like, oh, okay, cool. So we went to a cafe for our one-on-one meeting, and we just talked and learned about each other, learned about each other's personal and professional backgrounds, right? So I was able to build a lot of positive relationships at work. It's always intentional. Meaning, again, the M and the E for me are always interrelated. If I'm doing something highly engaged, it's usually connected to the meaning that it provides in my life, right? So again, I may never see any of y'all again, but I truly believe that this information is valuable, and I've had a lot of feedback in past sessions saying like, "Yo, this presentation, though, this presentation is amazing. It really changed how I started to move." Right? That to me is so meaningful to hear, even if it's just one or two people, and that's super important to me. Accomplishment, I think everyone at this state has professional goals. Like we're all right. Every year we renew our list of professional goals. So professionally, it's actually hard to not feel accomplished because we are constantly challenging ourselves to make sure we're reaching for something. One of my favorite conversations with my supervisor recently was she straight up said, I never want you to feel like you're stagnating, right? Because she has an HR background and she tells me that that's one of the reasons why people leave jobs is because they feel like they've stagnated. They feel like they hit a ceiling. And I don't want you to ever feel that way. So we're very open about, hey, what do you want to accomplish? What kind of training are you seeking, right? What tools do you want to put in your toolbox next? So always looking for accomplishment at my job. And then the health, this is tricky, especially for a lot of us. Depending on your position, I don't think you can focus so much on physical health at work. However, let me just give some examples of how it could work. So, on my calendar, I am privileged enough to be in a position at an office where we are encouraged to take breaks, right? And so, on my calendar, when I'm on break, I literally put metas around the block. So, everybody in the office knows he's literally outside walking around the building. And that ties into physical health. I'm getting my steps in, right? I sometimes on some days I'll put 3 5-minute breaks throughout the day, right? Mini breaks, but that equals to 15 minutes of walking, even while I'm at work. Many folks I've seen who do have cameras turned on during working hours, they got those like little walkolators. I don't know what to call it. Walkamills, like treadmills, but they're made for walking. Um, And right, they're on the call, they're talking business, they're talking work, and they're just walking because they know that, hey, if I sit at this desk all day, it's bad for the hips, right? It's bad for posture, it's bad for the spine. So they get up and they have a little walking machine at their home. So again, the whole point of me sharing all this is to show folks that while it may feel very natural to put the perma wheel over your personal life, the way I shared for my flourishing examples, it's actually very possible to overlay it over your professional life too. It's actually quite easy. Um, Dana, I set an alarm every hour to be sure that I get up. Yes, you're already doing it. See, you're already doing it a bit every hour. And I feel it if I don't. Yeah, you really do feel it. I feel it all the time. right? So that's great. You're already taking care of the health portion of the perma wheel. Okay. Any questions or other comments? Maybe, insights, takeaways before I push forward? Molly, I love my walk stand desk with treadmill. Oh, so you have one, Molly? Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Great to hear. The standing desk changed the game for virtual, for sure. I think there was a one point where CSAP partnered with a different, I forget what agency, but we are doing a bunch of ergonomics presentations because remote work is real and we want people to have an ergonomic setup so that their bodies are still being taken care of, right? Thanks for sharing, y'all. Okay, so I will push us forward then. So what I want to do is just spend a couple of minutes here on your own. I just want you to measure your perma wheel on a scale of 0 to 7, 0 being never, 7 being always, and just answer these questions. You could write it down or you could just mentally answer them. Positive emotions. In general, how often do you feel positive? Engagement. How often do you become absorbed in what you're doing? And relationships. How often do you feel satisfied with your personal relationships and professional relationships? I'll give you about a minute. Let me just set my timer so I don't lose track of time. Stopwatch, I should say. Give you about 15 more seconds to just reflect on those questions. And here are the other pieces of the perma wheel that I'd like you to also think about. Meaning, in general, how often do you feel like you lead a purposeful, meaningful life? Accomplishment, how often do you feel you are making progress towards your goals? And H, in general, health. In general, how often do you feel like you're in good health? Give you about 45 seconds to 50 seconds to think. Give you about 10 more seconds to just think about it. All right. I would love if y'all could share some of your thoughts around the measurement of your perma wheel. Here are just some reflection questions. What thoughts do you have regarding your results? What factors are contributing to your results? And are there changes you wish to make seeing your results? You can chat or you can unmute. It is up to you. Any reflections that you'd like to share? Any surprises on how you scored? All right. Haley, thanks for sharing. I feel like my results can vary month to month. Yeah, no, that's very true, right? And again, it's that wobble, right? It's that wobble with pieces of the pie. For sure, it changes. Always room to improve, Allison. Yup, I agree. Pleased with how often I feel that I am engaged. I am engaged. Yes, we love to hear it. Engagement, high engagement. You're excited to work on things. Yes, we love it. Erin, I feel like my scores indicate that I'm fulfilled, just stressed. That's fair. Hey, fulfilled and stressed can exist, right? Those two things can be true at the same time, 100%. Carla, I feel you. Room for improvement for sure. Yep, there are some days where I look at my promo wheel and feel exactly the same, 100%. Thanks for sharing. I'm glad that some of us feel engaged and feel excited for what we're doing at work. Hopefully, also in the personal realm. That's really important. So that's really good news. Kim, a factor that supports the PERMA score is my colleagues and department support wellness and take it for themselves as well. 100%. Isn't it wonderful to be part of a team that prioritizes emotional and mental wellness? Like, that's so, so important. I'm glad to hear that. And now that y'all have the PERMA language, y'all can include that in your conversations around wellness, right? What I really love about the PERMA wheel is even if the person you're talking to has zero knowledge of the PERMA wheel, it can still be used as such strong anchor points for conversations. So for example, my sister-in-law, sometimes, I'll see her occasionally, like once every 3 or 4 months. And, we'll sit down and maybe she'll say something like, I've been feeling really depressed lately, right? And as an emotional intelligence coach, I'm like, okay, is it like are you feeling actual depression? Like have you been able to talk to your therapist about it, right? Things like that. And she's like, well, no, not like that, but I just feel really sad. And then we're able to like, okay, let's maybe get to the bottom of the sadness. And I can use the perma wheel, for example. Have you been feeling engaged in anything lately? Like super highly into doing things? Right? Like, no, I haven't really. I've just been sitting around on my phone. Like, oh well, hey, maybe we can figure out, right? Things that you can get lost in, things that'll get you in the zone, right? So it's really easy to then guide conversations about stress, about feeling unfulfilled, about feeling sad or not whole, not like themselves. And I love the perma wheel for that. Any last ideas or key takeaways before we start wrapping up here in regards to your results? All right, let's push forward. Um, let's do this to wrap us up as our last activity, and then we'll open up for questions. But this is a future self exercise. You've probably done something like this in the past in some kind of presentation or training, but we love it. Consider your best possible future self. What would this look or feel like? Best is subjective. Take less than 5 minutes. Let's maybe do 2 minutes to just reflect. And here are just some prompts, very similar to the reflection we just did. What's contributed or challenged the perma wheel? What kind of commitments can you make right now, immediately? How does work and other aspects of life look, feel, or sound like? So again, think about your future self. What does the best possible future you look like? And you can do this mentally or you can do it on a piece of paper. Let's spend the next 2 minutes just doing this future self visioning work. Give you about 1 more minute to think about your future self, and then we'll come back. All right, go ahead and wrap up that future thinking exercise that you're doing, whether it's on paper or internally. And as always, no pressure, but would love to open it up. Does anyone want to share about their commitments or things that they're going to change or just insights about their future self? All right, if there is nobody who would like to share, no worries. The future self is sometimes, oh, Brooke. Thanks, Brooke. My best possible future self involves me scheduling more time. Yeah. To do the things I love and enjoy instead of overworking. Yeah, Brooke. Definitely, definitely, definitely. Try to find that, try to be intentional. I love the word intentional, right? I love like the idea of doing things you enjoy, doing things that you can be fully engaged in, right? That's definitely changes how we feel overall for sure. And I think oftentimes, like sometimes you just need support too, either from other colleagues or people in your proximity to like, hey, can you actually help me stay accountable to managing my time better in terms of doing things for myself? That's important. Lately, I've committed to building my community outside of work. We love it. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Community is such a big thing, right? Organizations, community, faith groups, like that helps, especially with the meaning piece of the pie. See ya, Gabrielle. Thanks for being here. Haley, I feel like this model requires a lot of self awareness. Ooh, 100%, Haley. Yeah, it does. Totally, totally, totally. And it is as simple as just self reflecting, right? Hey, you can just use that measurement that we did 0 to 7. You know, I'm feeling some type of way. Let's measure the perma wheel 0 to 7. Easy way, right? Um, Maybe not easy, but accessible. Lexus, 3 things I need to prioritize: exercising daily. We love it. Being creative. We love it. And learning new things. Asking how can I check all 3 boxes every day will be a change for me. 100%. And I also, is the coach in me coming out. And sometimes it doesn't have to be all 3 boxes, right? It could just be one, right? One every single day, guaranteed bare minimum. 3, let's shoot for the moon. And if we hit one, still, still a good day, right? For sure. Or Lord X for each one. Yeah, right. Maybe just shrink the scope of each one, right? Because I'm gonna argue cooking is creativity, right? Cooking a new dish, that's creativity. That is new. Your trip to the store, daily exercise, right? You can roll it all into one, right? You're very welcome. Thanks, Sherry. All right, I'm gonna close this out. Thank y'all so much for sharing. I think we're gonna wrap up with just leaving the floor open for questions.